Hi, I'm Karen.
And I'm Elise,
Welcome back to Poodle People.
where we talk about all things poodles.
Hi, everyone. Just a few updates before we get to this week's guest. I have a litter that I'm expecting early December. So if you are looking for a potential show dog, a pet, or a service dog, please get in touch. Info at Scotch Corner Standard Poodles at gmail.com or use my Instagram, Strong Contestant No O. Also, I just wanted to let people know who are in the Kentucky area that I am hosting the Kentucky Poodle Parade at Jacobson Park in Lexington, Kentucky. So if you are within driving distance after Thanksgiving, please come. It's the Saturday following Thanksgiving from 10 a.m. to noon. From 10 to 11, we will have a poodle meet and greet, and then we will have a walk that counts toward the AKC Fit Dog title. And all dogs are welcome for the walk. I hope to see you there if you are in the area. I also wanted to let you know that I'd love to get feedback. It's really useful and exciting when people reach out to me. Dr. Modiano's episode was popular, and people let me know that they really enjoyed that. And I'd love getting more feedback so I know what you are interested in, and how my interests and your interests align. So if you have ideas for guests, or if there's anyone in particular you'd like me to interview, if there are any handlers, small businesses, whatever it is, whatever you'd like to learn more about, please get in touch and let me know. I would really appreciate that. This is really a pet project of mine. I love doing it, but I also want to serve the greater poodle community. So please don't be a stranger. This week's guest is Abby Hodder. I found Abby during one of my many Google searches. I'm usually trolling for information about different canine programs, research, all that kind of stuff. And I was on Penn State's website and I found Abby's new program. Abby has an extension appointment, so she is at a land grant university and she has a cooperative extension appointment to develop and improve canine breeding. And that is a very new kind of program. I haven't seen anyone else with this kind of position at any university. Although there is a lot of research, like the NIH Genome Project, Dr. Friedenberg, Dr. Modiano, those are sort of bench science projects, or programs, whereas this is a very hands-on applied research project to improve both breeder experience and puppies. So I thought it would be really interesting to talk to her and get some more information. I hope you enjoy the conversation with her as much as I did. Hi, Abby. It's so nice to have you here with me.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Oh, I'm really excited to talk to you. I loved finding your webpage and reading a little bit about what you were doing. So I'm really excited that you had time to come on the podcast and share a little information. But before we start talking about your new position at Penn State, I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about your education and background, before you got here at Penn State University.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm actually Canadian. I did my undergraduate degree at Dalhousie University in Nova Scotia. And that was a Bachelor of Science in Agriculture, majoring in animal science. And then I went on to do my master's in animal welfare and behavior at the University of Guelph. And then I went on to Calgary after that and did a second master's in veterinary medical sciences, which still had a heavy focus on behavior and welfare. And then I had after I graduated, I started my own business, working with the public on canine education and behavior. And this included, one-on-one teaching classes and things like that, and also working with shelters. So I did that for about 2 years, and then I got the position at Penn State, and here I am.
Very cool. It's so nice to talk to a Canadian. I always find it interesting to learn because there are, you're our neighbor to the north, but there are slight differences. So it's always interesting.
Absolutely.
So before we get into your new position, let's just continue talking a little bit about you. Um, what kind of dog do you have?
I have a working line German Shepherd.
Awesome. And
Yeah.
what's her name?
Her name is Yara.
Yara. So what kinds of dogs is Yara the only dog you've had, or you've had others during your
Um,
childhood?
so she's currently the only dog I have at the moment, but yes, I grew up with dogs. I had a golden retriever growing up, and then family and close family friends had German shepherds and Brittany's. So um, I had lots of dogs around, luckily, growing up. And then after my golden passed and I was still in school and wasn't really sure where I was going to end up, so I actually decided to foster through a couple of shelters. So I did that for a few years, and so I had lots of dogs around through that, and then finally got the dog I currently have today.
Fostering is such a good way to build skills. I wish that
It
I didn't have a pack of dogs and could foster.
It is. I did really enjoy it, and sometimes I miss it, and I would like to continue to do it again. Of course, right now with my workload and everything, it's not one is more than enough. But no, it was really rewarding, and it was nice to work with a lot of different dogs.
Yeah, I have a friend who fosters a lot, and she does both dogs and kittens. So she gets a lot of experience and a lot of exposure, and she's in between dogs. So it's a really nice way for people to, you know, contribute. Um,
Absolutely, absolutely.
yeah. So does Yara get to go to work with you?
No, unfortunately, she does not. So my office is on campus, and so of course only service dogs are allowed on campus. And I'm not even sure if she would enjoy coming to work with me and
Oh my
hanging out in the
God.
office all
Yeah.
day. But at least with my job, I'm very lucky where I don't have a teaching appointment right now, where I'm teaching students. So my job is quite flexible. So I can work from home, or work on campus. And when I travel, I do bring her with me when I travel. So that's always fun.
Yeah. Traveling with a dog is wonderful
Yes.
and adds a slight element of safety, or at least makes you feel like you're safe.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, she's a great travel buddy, and anytime I go somewhere new, of course, the US is new to me as well. So, and
Oh,
whenever
right.
we're
Yeah.
driving
Yeah.
and traveling somewhere, I usually make a note to stop somewhere, that I wouldn't
Mhm.
usually stop if I didn't have a dog. So we go, we've got to see some different lakes and beaches and hiking spots and whatnot. So that's always fun.
Oh, that's super. Do you have a favorite spot outside of Pennsylvania? I won't ask you, to pick your favorite Pennsylvania spot, but
That's a great question. Honestly, I can't say that I have a favorite one. I've really, really enjoyed everywhere that I've gone thus far, so I think that's a really good thing.
yeah. Yeah, that's wonderful.
Every
Um,
every state, has something different to offer, so I think that's what
cool.
makes it difficult to, pick a favorite.
Right. Um, so you had your own business before you joined Penn State. How did you get into that?
Yeah, so, of course, growing up with dogs and things like that, but when I was at Guelph, the research that I was doing specifically was around horses, but a really good friend of mine, their project was with canines, and so myself and a few other friends helped her with that project, and so that's really where the passion for dogs has always been there, but the more education and specific behavior component related to dogs kind of started to evolve. And then once I went to Calgary, and then of course with my foster dogs, that that definitely kind of sent me down the path of learning as much as I could, and working with these dogs, and things like that. So throughout that time, I was just trying to get as much hands-on experience and knowledge as I could. And then once I was finished at Calgary and kind of trying to figure out what my next steps would be, whether it's continuing education or what jobs would be out there, it had always been a passion of mine to start a business, and of course, educating is something that I love to do. So I decided to give that a go and see where that would go. And I did. I really enjoyed it for those couple of years.
That's very cool.
Mhm.
I enjoy educating too, but I just don't feel like I have the training skills. I'm not particularly good, as anyone will tell you that my dogs are spoiled and, kind of rotten. But I do enjoy educating, so I kind of use the podcast as my outlet for education.
I love that.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about this new position that Penn State created and how that came about.
Sure. Yeah. So my position is to create a canine extension program at Penn State, and so really the importance of that is to provide education and support to dog breeders. And so the position came about from an external funder that actually approached the university, that they had, learned that the breeding community wanted more education and research and things like that. And so they created this position and approached Penn State, and Penn State, you know, made it happen. And here we are. So,
That's awesome. So, if any of our listeners are wondering what we mean by extension, Abby and I both work at a land grant university, and all land grant universities in the United States have cooperative extension. It looks a little bit different in each state. I'm in Kentucky, and for us, we have a cooperative extension office in every county. And our mission is to work with producers and to apply our research to their needs. So it is very applied, and the research is not done in an ivory tower. We are very reactive to what people need. Abby, do you feel like that is the same in Pennsylvania?
yeah, and I think we also have a lot of educators
Mhm.
throughout the state that work directly with the public as well. And even if they're not doing research themselves, they take what researchers are learning and report back to them, and they take that information and educate that and provide education to members of the community. So yeah, there's lots of different positions within extension, which I find
Mhm.
really really cool actually.
Yeah, and extension, ranges from sewing
Mhm.
to
Yeah,
covering topics like canning food to crop yield to invasive pests, all kinds of issues that people need information on, and cooperative extension provides quality information.
exactly. That is the goal.
Um, yeah. So it's really exciting because I think that you're the first extension canine program.
So yeah, I mean, for a specific program, thus far, it's the only one that I've found. We'll say I've been looking for others. There are lots of other extension programs out there that have canines as a component of what they do. Purdue has a really great extension component. That they look into. Actually, they do some research in commercial breeding and things like that.
Right,
But overall, it's certainly more of a niche area in terms of the dog breeding perspective.
right.
It's really Penn State and Purdue.
And, certainly other universities are doing research into other issues like genetics
Mhm.
or specific diseases, cancers, those kinds of things. But the extension canine program is a very different um, application of knowledge.
Right. Yeah, it's there's a really heavy component of working with the public, and that's my primary
Yes.
job, right? Is
Yeah.
is to provide help and education to whatever needs that that they're looking for.
So, how have you spent your first year? Have you met with a lot of breeders and organizations?
Yeah, so my first year, really the emphasis or importance for this year is really to build relationships.
Hmm.
So I needed to know what the needs are specifically, and in order to do that, it's meeting as many people as I possibly can. So that's
Right.
included multiple different organizations. I've met with different researchers and different institutions, breeders, which however you want to define them. There's, the preservation breeders, hobby breeders, commercial
Right.
breeders, all of those things. So I've been able to meet a lot of people this year, which has been great. It's been fun.
Yeah. How many miles have you and Yara put on your vehicle?
Too many.
Yeah. Pennsylvania is a big state, but it's
It
beautiful.
is. Yes.
So what do you feel like you've accomplished this first year, and what do you hope to do in the next year or few years?
That's a great question. I think this year I have been able to make a lot of really good relationships,
Mhm.
especially with different breeders and things like that. And I've been lucky that I've had a lot of support along the way, and there's been a lot of people that have been very excited about this program and things like that. So everyone in that regard who's helped me has been wonderful. So that's definitely been the highlight of this year. And so for next year, my plan is to really start kind of making this program look like a program in terms of,
Mhm.
actually having educational articles, webinars, workshops, and things like that. So, we actually have something to learn.
Right. That's exciting.
It is.
So, land grant universities usually have a primary focus of their state. Can you talk a
Mhm.
little bit about the situation and the audience in Pennsylvania that you will be serving?
Absolutely. And so, my overall vision for this program really is for anybody, anyone that has a passion for dogs and wants to learn more, that they can, go on the website and, learn as much as they can, attend workshops and webinars if they'd like. But the main focus that is my current priority is dog breeders, and specifically commercial breeding as well. So.
And do you have a sense of what commercial dog breeding looks like in Pennsylvania? Like how many how many dogs would that does that look like to you? I know that this is, this varies.
It does. It varies. And so we have dog law here in the state as well. And so, you know, all commercial breeding operations or and things like that are required to be licensed by law. And so it does vary in terms of how many dogs each kennel has. Um, and so yeah, it's definitely a wide variety. I've seen quite a few, but there's also a lot that I haven't seen.
Okay. And is the licensing, is it kind of like you have to meet certain criteria, or are you just paying a fee?
So you do have to meet certain criteria. So within the laws, there's a lot of different definitions of the different licensing that's required.
Hmm.
And so I can't go into all that because I don't
Sure.
even know all the different ones. But no, there's a set of requirements that they do have to follow in order to be licensed. And if they're not doing things properly or things like that, so they get inspections twice a year. And so if something's out of place or things like that, there is penalties associated to that and whatnot. So it's a
Okay.
whole system.
Right. So we're going to be talking about things, and I just want to mention to our listeners that we are trying to come from this from a place of respect, both for the breeders and for the dogs, of course. So I hope everyone remains open-minded as we kind of parse through some of these slightly challenging topics and the things that we are going to be talking about, because I think just keeping an open mind is so important, because we are if we don't talk about them, we don't learn and understand things, right? um
Yes.
so
That you said that beautifully.
thank you. So uh, I guess I'm a preservation breeder, although I don't really call myself that, but I'm breeding standard poodles and want to improve the breed.
Mhm.
um but I also could be considered a backyard breeder, I guess. I have 1 or 2 litters a year, so I'm very small. And I think that these kinds of terms are tricky. Puppy mill is something that gets tossed around a lot and is, almost always a negative term. So how are you kind of um, processing these different terms, and do you have conversations with breeders about this?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's something that, in a way, has been a little bit challenging as I've dove more into this world. Is when you do ask somebody what is an ethical breeder, you get 1,000 different definitions, and then yeah, like you just said, there's backyard breeder, hobby breeder, preservation breeder, puppy. There's a lot of different terms there, and so I have spoken to some breeders about this, and it's an area that I'm trying to actually gain a lot more information in. And is there a way that we can actually create these definitions and really dissect them? And I also think that education comes along with that in order to kind of be unanimous in what we actually agree on these terms, or what these terms should be, I should say. So it's yeah, that's something that's top of my brain, and something I'm hoping to look into soon, and get the public involved in that as well, and actually
Yeah,
figuring out these definitions, right?
I think that that would be such a service the to everyone, because none of the terms are, in my opinion, none of the terms are particularly positive. Like,
Mhm. Mhm.
obviously, puppy mill is not positive, backyard breeder is not positive,
Right.
and preservation breeder sounds kind of snobby and, like it's excluding other people. And I think that there's a little bit of judgmental behavior, or they sound judgmental, is what I'm trying to say.
I agree. I agree with that, and I think there's a lot of people that think there's, only one way of doing things, when
Yes.
really, there is other ways of doing things, and so I think that that's, where we could kind of explore that more and kinda create these definitions, and, yeah, not be so negative about all of these things as well, and, you know, actually talking about it.
Yeah, it's interesting because I do have a bit of a horse background, and people typically do not have, like, you don't call someone a backyard breeder in
Mhm.
horse terms. It's just not,
Yeah.
like, you're not really pejorative that way. And there are some people who are racing thoroughbreds who have 1 or 2 horses in their stable, and, that is unusual, but it's awfully cool. And I think if we could find a way to celebrate people wanting to breed dogs, and I am a standard poodle person, I always will be, and I want to improve the breed, but I also understand the joy of breeding animals and why people would make decisions to breed.
Yes, I love that. Yeah, that's perfect. That's exactly what I wanna, get more into, is that, it's okay if people have different goals for their breeding program, even if it's not, what you think it should be, so to speak,
Right.
as long as, the welfare and the ethics are there, for the dogs, right?
Right.
How, your goals for your breeding program, I mean, they can be for sport, it can be service dogs, it can be
Yeah.
purpose-bred sport mixes, that's a thing. If you wanna preserve the breed itself, if you wanna breed for companion dogs, there is a place for all of that. And it's okay if we have different goals.
It really, there is a big wide world and we need quality puppies. I would personally hope that people stop breeding every single thing to a poodle, because the
Yes.
poodle is such an amazing breed. But people have different goals. They have different objectives. So I love that you are trying to address this.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that we can have some good discussions, because while I know that there's a lot of people with really strong opinions on things, I think there is a lot more people that feel the same way as we do, so need
Yeah.
to give them a platform to be heard.
Yeah. So I have spent a fair amount of time in Pennsylvania, And I know you have a lot of Amish people. Are the
Mhm.
Amish, is the Amish population, are they a big part of your breeding clientele?
They are. They are.
Um, so they often are used in specific horse areas, like to break horses or to help with difficult horses. So they have very particular skills. Do you find that that's also true in dog breeding?
I think the what I've learned thus far is, when it comes to dogs in the Amish, there's not a very good feeling around them.
Mm,
I think with a lot of stigma and a lot of things that have happened in the past, there's a lot of feelings around there, and a lot of times they're kind of put into one box, and
mhm,
then people kind of jump to the conclusion that, they're all the same.
right.
Um, and that's actually something I've become quite passionate about in the last years because I've met a lot of these people, and, the things that they're doing and the passion they have for their dogs has been, extremely heartwarming. And, they are very they're very humble about it. And, when I tell them, what they've done is amazing and their programs are so great and whatnot, the first thing they all say, of all of them that I've told this to, is, yeah, but it was really bad. And, there's still some bad breeders. And, I always remind them, I'm like, we know. In fact, that's really what most people think when they think of that. But, you have done really well, but they know how things were and whatnot. And there was a really big lack of education there as well. And it's like in any group, there's bad people in every group, right? But a lot of them have really taken, when we know better, we do better, to a whole other level.
Right. That's very interesting to hear. And I think it just illustrates that if we take the time to sit down and talk to someone, we realize,
Yeah.
so much about what they're trying to do. We understand it. Um, and, we are not born with tons of experience. I am still learning so much and always will be. I have more horse experience than I do dog experience, to be quite honest. Uh,
Mhm.
and I love learning, and I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, it is. It's been such an eye-opening year, in that respect, for sure.
Yeah,
And also just learning about, you know, their culture and who they are as people as well,
yeah,
and a lot of the hurdles that they're
yeah,
trying to overcome, while
sure.
also, a lot of them are limited to social media, and,
Right.
the negative narrative of them continues,
Mhm,
and there's not a lot of positive, and they also, like, can't necessarily contribute to that. um,
mhm.
and just, yeah, it's been very eye-opening, and it's something that I would really love to educate people on, if they're interested in what's actually going on in the dog breeding world, and, with specific communities as well, and things like that.
You'll have to write a blog post for your website about that.
Yeah.
So, in your clientele, are you seeing trends in dog breeds, or is it a huge variety?
There has been a wide variety. There is a lot, on the smaller dog side.
Oh, that's
So
interesting.
seeing Yeah, and so I think it's just because, smaller dogs, they are quite popular, especially for companion animals and things like that. It's also, smaller facilities and and things like that. There's lots of bonuses to small dogs,
Right.
but a lot of really love the breeds that they have.
Mhm.
And so there's a lot of Bichons and, Shih Tzus and Dachshunds and things like that.
Right. Okay.
But I've seen all over.
Yeah, I bet. Um, I'm still learning dog breeds, I think. Every once in a while, I'll see something, I'm like, "I don't know what that is." So, let's shift a little bit and talk about what good or appropriate socialization in either a puppy or a dog looks like to you.
Oh, that's a good question. When it comes to socialization, I mean, the most important component of that is creating, there's always two components that I talk about that are important. It's one, creating positive associations and how you're going to do that, right? So positive associations are, pairing new experiences with things that puppies love, right? And things that puppies love are, food is easy. And I usually always recommend food because they're going to eat anyways, right?
Right.
Or play, toys, things like that. And the second one is really thinking about preparing them for their life as an adult, right? And so making sure that you take into consideration all those things when they go into their new homes, what are they going to experience, right? So, um, kind of creating a list in that regard in terms of, cars and kennels and leashes and vet appointments and grooming and handling and all of those things. The list goes on. So I do like to see people be intentional about both of those things, right? Find ways to set your puppy up for success in their new home. So we're building confidence, we're building resilience, and we do that through socialization, which is making those positive associations. So yeah, that's really what I like to see people doing and being really intentional about it.
So I can share a little bit of a story about my first dog, Max Lieberman. Um, I knew that Max Lieberman had been raised in a kennel with his siblings, and he was one of 12 standard poodles. They were all male. And this was over 20 years ago now in Kentucky, which meant that in this area, there were very, very few standard poodles. And one of the mistakes, or one of the things that I didn't really understand right away, was that he had lived in the kennel. And even though he was in the house some, he was kept in the kitchen. So when I
Mhm.
brought him home, the first time I turned the TV on,
Mhm. Yeah,
he he drew himself back up on his legs and was staring at this box that was suddenly talking to him.
of course, yeah.
And he was like, "Okay, the furniture talks."
Yeah,
But you
yeah,
could see the absolute confusion. He was not scared, he was actually a lovely dog, but he was like, "Wait, what?"
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so all of those considerations, right? When, you're
Yeah,
thinking where your dogs are going and most likely where they're gonna live. You obviously can't cover everything, right? But the process of socialization and helping, your puppies through all of that, you're building confidence, you're building resilience. It's also that, when they're faced with new things or uncertain things that they're unsure of, that they can also handle it, right?
right,
That's
right.
part of the process.
So, what do most breeders do? What would you suggest they change in their socialization practices?
Oh my, well, I haven't seen every socialization program. I'm sure it varies widely. Um, I think sometimes people think that, positive associations are like exposure,
Uh-huh.
and exposure is very different, right? So, if, you have a puppy sitting outside of a park and they're watching kids play, there's absolutely a place for exposure, right? We're exposing them to seeing different sights and sounds and all of those things. And that's an important component, but it's the actually, taking the time to make positive associations with things is the component that I would like to see more people do, right? So, when we're teaching them handling and things like that, and you have some kibble, you touch their tail, you feed them some kibble, you touch their ear, you feed them some kibble or something like that, right? So you're
Right.
just being intentional about, hey, when this happens, really good things happen as well,
Yeah.
right? So it's not something to be scared of and whatnot. And I think it's a really good way to learn a lot about puppies as well. I like it when people are more so hands off with puppies. And I mean, of course, there's going to be times where you can't you pick a puppy up because you have to weigh them. I'm not talking about those sorts of things. But I mean, when introducing them to new people and whatnot, especially kids or something, I like seeing kids sitting on the ground, because if they're sitting on the ground, they're not up walking around and grabbing puppies. um, but sitting on the ground, you bring the puppies out, and the puppies have a choice whether to approach new people or new kids and things like that. Or if you are doing some handling things, instead of just grabbing their paw and clipping their nails, we're just going to start by touching their feet and seeing how they feel about that and following it up with some food. And you can gain a lot of really good information by doing those things as well. Because, let's say you're bringing puppies out to meet kids, and all the puppies are, running and jumping on the kids, but you have one that's a little bit more hesitant, and so that's information for you that, hey, that puppy needs a little bit more work in this area. He's a little bit unsure, and things like
Hmm.
that. It gives you a good idea on temperament and where you can help certain puppies, and all of these things. So
Yeah. Um,
there's lots more that could I could go on a rant about, but in a nutshell.
yeah, no, I love that. I am always thinking about socialization and what I can do to improve my program. It's always challenging when you have a litter of puppies, worrying about whether or not you're socializing them appropriately, if you've given them enough. And for me, with standard poodles, grooming is a really big thing. So I start them very early. And, to your point, I don't immediately start grooming them. They hear the dryer, they hear the clippers turned on, but not near them. It's a very iterative process.
Yeah, exactly, and with your specific breed, I mean, that's makes perfect sense, right? It does, because there is such a huge component, and, that's the whole point as well, of as creating a socialization program that works for you as well, right? So it's going to be very different. And that's what's quite challenging about socialization and things like that, is that there's such a wide variety of breeders and things like that. What works for one might not work for the other. And then there's also the individual component there with the individual dogs as well. And so it can be quite challenging, but, and we don't necessarily have the research to say, hey, if you do this amount of times, you have the perfect puppy. That's not really how behavior works anyways.
Right. No,
Um,
unfortunately.
so it can be challenging, but again, that's why I like to have that information gathering as well. When you do some of these things with your puppies, you can, see how the litter is turning out, what's working, what's not working, and every litter would really be kind of like an experiment, and then over time you see what starts to work, and what genetics are working well in the parents and whatnot. So there's a lot of components to it.
I think that as a population, we are starting to understand a little bit more. Like I see more posts on social
Yes.
media and more conversation about how exposure and socialization are not just taking your dog to as many places, right?
Yes.
It's not just number of times you've gone somewhere.
Exactly, yeah,
It's
and
more
I have
nuanced.
seen a lot more of that come up, in, social media and things like that, and it is really, really great to see that the education is there and people are pushing for that more. I
Yeah.
think there's, the definition of socialization means different things to different people,
Hmm.
um, and, like anything, that can be challenging, so I think it's just, getting the right information out there, and, you know, it's there's a lot.
Yeah, there is, and breeders, I have my puppies for 10 weeks. And, to some extent, there's only so much I can do in 10 weeks.
Mhm, absolutely.
I can only try to set them up as best I can. And
Mhm.
it is an ongoing process, really for years in some
Yeah.
cases.
Yeah, absolutely, and, breeders do have a great opportunity to kinda set them up, especially during that critical socialization window, um,
Hmm.
and so I think, starting right with the breeder, I mean, it's better than not, right? There's always gonna be so many factors that go into, temperament and things like that, but, I mean, the breeder has a huge, huge component. It is a huge important component of that, for sure.
Yeah. And, you just have to be realistic. Like, I don't have children. So my dogs are not used to small children. And it is challenging to get people to come over and play with your puppies at times. I know it sounds like everyone always
Yeah.
promises they're coming over. It doesn't always work as seamlessly because people have their own lives.
Right, absolutely, and so, it's sometimes it's about getting creative and doing
Hmm.
what you can with what you have, right? And,
Yep.
letting puppy parents know, "Hey, I don't have kids," and things like that, but, this
Yeah.
might be important to socialize your puppy with as well when you
Right.
bring it home,
Exactly.
right?
So I know that you have spent this first year gathering information. Do you have an idea of what some of the topics you have planned for your webinars are and what kind of timeline you're looking at?
Oof, you're asking for the details.
Oh, sorry. They can be general, just, you know,
Well,
roughly.
so I recently gave a couple talks, to some breeders within the community, and one was actually on puppy socialization, and the other was on breeding dog enrichment. And so that went really well, and so I'm hoping to do some webinars, um, for the public and things like that to include. There's just lots. There's there's just so much. So I think I'll start with the workshop, in terms of, like actual socialization. The hard part for me is that for some things I want to do, I need dogs. So
I
that
was
the
just gonna ask
timeline,
you that. Yeah.
yeah.
So,
So the timeline for that will vary, but I'm hoping I'll have something put together in the new year. And dog body language is also one that I really want to do as well, to kind of dive more into that, because it's also an important component for a socialization program as well. So
yeah. And with your horse experience, you probably know a lot about. I think we study horse body language more than we do dog, even
yeah.
though we have more dogs, right? It's
Well,
very interesting.
it's for sure, and I think it probably has something to do with the 1,000 pound animal that we that we have to work with. Maybe, we wanna know what they're feeling, so that,
Yeah. It's really interesting that there's so much research on so many different areas of the horse, and we
Mhm.
can't find the analogous research in the dog world.
It is, it can be frustrating sometimes. It's even,
Yeah.
in this before even coming into this position, I knew that the research was lacking in canine, but now where I could actually really use this research
Mhm.
to kinda help me along, there's a lot of holes there, and there's also a lot of misinformation out there.
Yes.
The dog world is very unique in that way that, an animal that lives in the majority of our houses, we actually know the least amount in a lot of ways. So hopefully that will change, though. Things seem to be changing.
And you also can just get a dog. Most people who
Mhm.
get a horse have to plan a lot more because are you boarding the
Exactly.
horse? Is the horse in your own barn? There's a lot more going on. Do you know how to ride? So you typically start learning in 4-H or pony club as a child, or as a young adult, you might be taking lessons, or as an older adult, you might be taking lessons, whereas you can just get a dog and
Exactly. And
you
that
just need a
causes
bowl and a
yeah.
leash, and
Yeah,
you can
and
run
that
that.
can cause a lot of issues there as well, right? Having a
Yes,
dog is a wonderful thing, but, there's the flip side of that as well, where, even when we look at welfare and things like that with dogs, it's very in some
right.
ways, it's quite difficult to actually even study because they're in people's homes and things like that, and, there's also it's really also kinda hard to regulate
Yeah,
those sorts of things, so
absolutely.
there's always a pro and a con, but, I am interested to see how the canine world will shift, especially with public education, more education being available, in the next 10 years or so.
Yeah, it really feels like things are starting to turn. Um, like there's momentum growing. Um, I see a lot of or one thing that I think is going to explode. I feel like socialization has kind of moved into the mainstream,
Mhm.
but I think that physical training, like physiotherapy, actually
Yeah,
training your dog, I think that that's something that is going to be on the horizon soon. Um,
absolutely, I
are there any other trends that you see? That might be a trick question because
agree. Yeah.
I'm not
Oh,
giving you much time to think about it.
goodness, yeah, there's a lot of there's also a lot of polarization going on, but in the dog training world that I see, that's a whole other can of worms that I'm
Yeah,
open.
yeah,
But things are starting to shift there as well. There's a lot of extreme views in the dog world, right? Because we all have dogs or we've all had dogs. So you know, then of course we must know all the things dog.
Right.
But there
Yes.
does seem to be a shift in that regard. And I am lately, I enjoy seeing people, more people being real on social media and things that they're struggling with, or, things that they would have done differently, or, all those things. I try and, you know, manipulate my algorithm so that I'm seeing less of the negatives, because I'm really, really, I'm sure like with
Right.
everybody would agree, I'm
Yeah.
really, really tired of the negatives.
Yeah.
And so I'm hoping, that we can move towards a path where, we are just kind to each other and we just learn from each other and help each other if that's what we need, instead of, shaming and blaming and all
Yeah.
of those.
And similarly, I sort of think that AKC is recognizing that it is not inclusive enough. Um, you probably are familiar with the AKC Fit Dog um, movement, or I don't know. It's a new program, or relatively new program, and I think that AKC recognizes that not everyone is going to show or compete. They may not have,
Mhm.
access to a full bred dog. They may not be able to travel. They may not want to spend their money that way, but it's a way
Yeah.
for them to set goals and just walk with their dog. It's the simplest title that you can get, but it encourages walking, which we know helps both the dog and the human. And I
Mhm.
think that that's one of those shifts for AKC that kind of reflects what we were talking about.
Yeah, and all of those things. I mean, because we do have to shift our thinking in a lot of ways. I mean, there's more than one way to have a dog. There's more than one way to raise a dog. And there's lots of different ways to make dogs happy, right? But we don't necessarily all fit into one bubble. That's just not how that works, right? Or we don't all have the same goal to, show in confirmation, or, you
Right.
know, only do this sport or that sport or anything like that. So it does need to be more inclusive in that regard. But there's, really when you do that and you kind of open that door, then at least there's always a place for everybody, right? And then people can find their people. And, that's the nice thing about those sorts of programs.
Yeah. Well, on that happy note, I would like to thank you for your time. I'm really grateful that you were able to talk to me today.
Oh, thank you so much. It was a great chat. I appreciate you having me.
Excellent. So, if listeners have questions, what is your website, or what is the best way for them to access more information?
Yeah, so on the Penn State Extension website, under animals, there is a canine subsection. And so that is where, you can put in your email information and things like that, where you'll get updates on upcoming webinars and things like that, and workshops and whatnot. So that would be the best way. And then all of my information is there as well. And, anybody can reach out to me at any time also.
Excellent. Well, Abby, thank you so much for joining me today. We were delighted to talk to you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, take care.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks for listening, and remember, a poodle will change your life. If you're interested in my breeding program or are ready to be added to my waiting list, please visit my website at scotchcornerstandardpoodles.com, where you will find all of the relevant information and links. Thanks so much. Hey, thanks for listening to this episode of Poodle People. Please remember to like us on your favorite platform, or even better, leave a review. We really appreciate it, and it helps us get new listeners. And if you have any questions you want me or Elise to answer, send us an email at poodlepeoplepodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening to this episode of Poodle People. See you next week.